In fact, he was asking you to do what you have done here today.
Correct, yes, sir.
And again, that said, did you say to the president that it would be inappropriate for you to do so, and then talk to the White House counsel or anybody, so hopefully they would talk to you?
First time I said, I'll see what we can do. Second time, I explained how it should that the White House counsel should contact the Deputy Attorney General. You told the president, said, that's what I'll do.
And just to be clear, for you to make a public statement,
Yes, sir. We wrestled with it. Two primary concerns. One was it creates a duty to correct, which I've lived before, and be very careful about doing that. And second, it's a slippery slope because if we say the president, the vice president are under investigation, what's the principal basis for stopping? So the leadership at Justice, acting Attorney General Pente, said you're not going to do that.
Now, on March 30th, during the phone call about General Flynn, you said he abruptly shifted and brought up something that you call, quote unquote, the McCabe thing. Specifically, the McCabe thing, as you understood it, was that McCabe's wife had received campaign money from what I assume means Terry College.
Yes, sir.
That was very close to the Clintons. And so, why had the president at any point in time expressed to you concern, opposition, potential opposition to McCabe? I don't like this guy because he got money from someone who's close to Clinton.
He had asked me during previous conversations about Andy McCabe and said, in essence, how's he going to be with me as president? I was pretty rough on him on the campaign trail.
He was rough on him.
He was rough by his own account. He said he was rough on McCabe and Mrs. McCabe on the campaign trail. How's he going to be? And I assured the president, Andy is a total pro. No issue at all. You got to know the people who are the guy there.
So when the president turns to you and says, remember, I never brought up the McCabe thing.
I wasn't sure what to make of it, honestly. That's possible, but it was so out of context that I didn't have a clear view of what it was.
Now, on a number of occasions here, you bring up, I was talking now about the General Russia investigation. Okay? Page 6 of your testimony, you say, he asked what we could do to quote-unquote lift the cloud of the General Russia investigation. And you responded that you were investigating the matter as quickly as you could and that there would be great benefit if we didn't find anything to having done the work well. And he agreed. You re-emphasized the problem that was causing it. He agreed. So in essence, the president agreed with your statement that it was great investigation, all the facts came out, and we found nothing. So he agreed that would be ideal, but this cloud is still messing up my ability to do the rest of the work. Is that an accurate assessment?
Yes, sir. He actually went farther than that. He said, and if some of my satellites did something wrong, it'd be good to find that out.
Well, that's the second part, and that is, he says, one of my satellites, and after that he met some of the other people surrounding his campaign did something wrong, it would be great to know that as well.
Yes, sir, that's what he said.
So are those the only two instances in which that sort of back and forth, where the president is basically saying, and I'm paraphrasing here, it's okay, do the Russia investigation, I hope it all comes out, it had nothing to do with anything else. It'd be great if it all came out, if people around him were doing things wrong.
Yes, as I recorded it accurately there, that was the sentiment he was expressing.
So what it bears it comes down to is the president has asked three things. He asked for your loyalty. He said you honestly loyal. He asked you on one occasion. He said the exact same thing in the press the next day. He's a good guy, he's treated unfairly, etc., etc. So I imagine your FBI agents read that. The president's wishes were known to them, certainly by the next day. Going back, the three requests were, number one, be loyal. Number two, let the Mike Flynn thing go, he's a good guy, he's been treated unfairly. And number three, can you please tell the American people what these leaders in Congress already know, what you already know, you told me 3 times that I'm not personally under investigation.
Those are the 3 things he asked, yes, sir.
You know, this investigation is full of leaks left and right. I mean, we learn more from the newspapers sometimes than we do from our open hearings, for sure. You ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the president was not person in the investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans knew that and have known that for weeks?
I don't know. I find matters that are briefed to the Gang of Eight are pretty tightly held in my experience.
Finally, who are those senior leaders of the FBI?
Director, my chief of staff, general counsel, deputy directors, chief counsel, and more often than not, three-person at the FBI, associate deputy director, and then quite often head of the national security branch.
Comey, welcome. You and I have had significant policy differences over the years, particularly protecting Americans' access to secure encryption. But I believe the timing of firing states demonstrate why presidential now to my January 27th, all in one dinner. President he asked for your loyalty. He denied allegations against him. Like warned looking back, did that dinner suggest that your job might be contingent?
Not that I go that far. I got a sense my job would be contingent how he felt I conducted myself, whether I demonstrated loyalty. I don't know whether I go so far as to connect it to the investigation.
The president is trying to create some sort of patronage. In a patronage relationship,
Yes. At least consider how what you're doing will affect the boss as a significant consideration.
Let me turn to the Attorney General. In your statement, you said that you and the FBI leadership team decided not to discuss the president's actions with Attorney General Sessions, even though he had not accused himself. What was it about the Attorney General's own interactions with the Russians, or his behavior with regard to the investigation, that would have led the entire leadership of the FBI to make this decision?
Our judgment, as I recall, was that he was very close to and inevitably going to recuse himself. Recommending that he recuse himself, that he was not going to be in contact with Russia-related matters much longer, and that turned out to be the case.
How would you characterize Attorney General Sessions' recusal, in particular with regard to Russia-related matters, that turned out to be the case? Because of the Russian investigation.
That's a question I can't answer. I think it's a reasonable question. If as the president said, I was fired because of the Russia investigation, why was the Attorney General involved in that chain? I don't know. And so I don't have an answer to that question.
Your testimony was that the president's request about Flynn could infect the investigation. Had the president got what he wanted and what he asked of you, what would have been the effect on the investigation?
But we would have closed any investigation of General Flynn in connection with his statements about encounters with late part of December. So we would have dropped and opened the criminal investigation.
So, in effect, when you talk about infecting the enterprise, drop something major would have spoken the overall ability
good as our people are, our judgment was we don't want them hearing that the President of the United States wants this to go away, because it might have an effect on their ability to be fair and impartial and aggressive.
Now, the acting Attorney General, Yates, found out that Michael Flynn could be blackmailed by the Russians. She went immediately to warn the White House. Flynn is gone, but other individuals with contacts with the Russians are still in extremely important positions of power. Do the American people have the same sense of urgency now?
All I can say, Senator, is the special counsel's investigation is very important. Understanding what efforts there were or are by the Russian government to influence our government is a critical part of the FBI's mission. So, and you've got the right person in Bob Mueller to lead it. So it's a very important piece of work.
Vice President Pence was the head of the transition. To your knowledge, was he aware of the concerns about Michael Flynn prior to or during General Flynn's tenure as National Security Advisor?
I don't. You're asking, including up to the time when Flynn was forced to resign? My understanding is that he was. I'm trying to remember where I get that understanding from. I think from Acting Attorney General James.
So, former Acting Attorney General Yates testified that concerns about General Flynn were discussed with the intelligence community. Would that have included anyone at the CIA or Dan Coates' office at the DNR?
I would assume yes.
Michael Flynn resigned 4 days after Attorney General Sessions was sworn in. Do you know if the Attorney General was aware of the concerns about Michael Flynn during that period?
Don't, as I sit here, I don't recall that he was. I could be wrong, but I don't remember that he was.
And finally, let's see if you can give us some sense of who recommended your firing. Besides the letters from the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, do you have any information on who may have recommended or have been involved in your firing?
I don't. No.
Senator Comey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Comey, let me begin by thanking you for your voluntary compliance with our request to appear before this committee and assist us in this very important investigation. I want first to ask you about your conversations with the President, the 3 conversations in which you told him that he was not under investigation. The first was during your January 6th meeting, according to your testimony, in which it appears that you actually volunteered that assurance. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did you limit that statement to counterintelligence investigations, or were you talking about any kind of FBI investigation?
I didn't use the term counterintelligence. I was speaking to him and briefing him about some salacious and unverified material. It was in the context of that he had a strong and defensive reaction about that not being true. And my reading of it was important for me to assure him we were not personally investigating him. And so the context then was actually narrower, focused on what I just talked to him about. But it was very important because it was first true, and second, it was very, very much about being in kind of a J. Edgar Hoover type situation. I didn't want him thinking that I was briefing him on this to sort of hang it over him in some way. Briefing him on it because we were told by the media it was about to launch. I didn't want to be keeping that from him, and if there was something, he needed to know this was being said. But I was very keen not to leave him with an impression that the Bureau was trying to do something for him. So that's the context in which I said, sir, we're not personally investigating you.
And then, and that's why you volunteered the information.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Then on the January 27th dinner, you told the president that he should be careful about asking you to investigate because, quote, you might create a narrative that we are investigating him personally, which we weren't. Again, were you limiting that statement to counterintelligence investigations or more broadly, such as a criminal investigation?
The context was very similar. I didn't modify the word investigation. It was, again, he was reacting strongly against that unverified material, saying, I'm tempted to order you to investigate it. And that, in the context of that, I said, sir, you want to be careful about that because it might create a narrative we're investigating you personally.
And then there was the March 30th phone call with the president in which you reminded him that congressional leaders had been briefed that we were not personally, the FBI was not personally investigating President Trump. And again, was that statement to congressional leaders and to the president limited to counterintelligence investigations, or was it a broader statement? I'm trying to understand whether there was any kind of investigation of the president underway.
No, I'm sorry. And if I misunderstood, I apologize. We briefed the congressional leadership about what Americans we had opened counterintelligence investigation cases on, and we specifically said the president is not one of those Americans. But that there was no other investigation of the president that we were not mentioning at that time. What the context was counterintelligence, but I wasn't trying to hide some criminal investigation.
And was the president under investigation at the time of your dismissal on May 9th?
No.
I'd like to now turn to the conversations with the president about Michael Flynn, which have been discussed at great length. And first, let me make very clear that the president never should have cleared the room, and he never should have asked you, as you reported, to let it go, to let the investigation go. But I remain puzzled by your response. Your response was, I agree that Michael Flynn is a good guy. You could have said, Mr. President, this meeting is inappropriate, this response could compromise the investigation. You should not be making such a request. It's fundamental to the operation of our government, the FBI, being insulated from this kind of political pressure. And you've talked a bit today about that you were stunned by the president making the request. But my question to you is, later on, upon reflection, did you go to anyone at the Department of Justice and ask them to call the White House counsel's office and explain that the president had to have a far better understanding and appreciation of his role vis-a-vis the FBI?
In general, I did. I spoke to the Attorney General and I spoke to the new Deputy Attorney General, Mr. Rosenstein, when he took office, and explained my serious concern about the way in which the president is interacting, especially with the FBI. And I specifically, as I said in my testimony, told the Attorney General, it can't happen that you get kicked out of the room and the president talks to me. So, look, in the room, but why didn't we raise the specific? It was of investigative interest to us to try and figure out, so what just happened with the president's request, so I would not have wanted to alert the White House that it had happened until we figured out what are we going to do with this investigation.
Your testimony was that you went to Attorney General Sessions and said, don't ever leave me alone with him again. Are you saying that you also told him that he had made a request that you let it go with regard to the investigation of Michael Flynn?
No, I specifically did not. I did not.
You mentioned that from your very first meeting with the president, you decided to write a memo memorializing the conversation. What was it about that very first meeting that made you write a memo when you had not done that with two previous presidents?
As I said, a combination of things. A gut feeling is an important overlay on the circumstances, that I was alone, the subject matter, and the nature of the person that I was interacting with, and my read of that person. And yeah, and really just a gut feel laying on top of all of that, it's going to be important to protect this organization, that I make records of this.
And finally, did you show copies of your memos to anyone outside of the Department of Justice?
Yes.
And to whom did you show copies?
I asked, the president tweeted on Friday, after I got fired, that I better hope there's not tapes. I woke up in the middle of the night on Monday night, because it didn't dawn on me originally, that there might be corroboration for our conversation, there might be a tape. And my judgment was I needed to get that out into the public square. And so I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with the reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel. And so I asked a close friend of mine to do it.
And was that Mr. Wittes?
No.
Who was that?
A good friend of mine who's a professor at Columbia Law School.
Thank you.
Mr. Comey, prior to January 27th of this year, have you ever had a one-on-one meeting or a private dinner with a president of the United States?
No. I met dinner, no. I had 2 one-on-ones with President Obama that I laid out in my testimony, once to talk about law enforcement issues, law enforcement and race, which was an important topic throughout for me and for the president, and then once very briefly for him to say goodbye.
Were those brief interactions?
No, the one about law enforcement and race and policing, we spoke for probably over an hour, Mr. Jones.
How unusual is it to have a one-on-one dinner with the president? Did that strike you as odd?
Yeah, so much so that I assumed there would be others that couldn't possibly be having dinner with me alone.
Do you have an impression that if you had found if you had behaved differently in that dinner, and I'm quite pleased that you did not, but if you had found a way to express some sort of expression of loyalty, or given some suggestion that the Flynn criminal investigation might be pursued less vigorously, do you think you would have still been fired?
I don't know. It's impossible to say looking back. I don't know.
But you felt like those two things were directly relevant to your the kind of relationship that the president was seeking to establish with you?
Sure. Yes.
The president has repeatedly talked about the Russian investigation into the U.S. Or Russia's involvement in the U.S. election cycle as a hoax and as fake news. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw as FBI director, and obviously only the parts that you can share in this setting, that demonstrate how serious this action actually was, and why there was an investigation in the first place?
Yes, sir. There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle. They did it with purpose, they did it with sophistication, they did it with overwhelming technical efforts, and it was an active measures campaign driven from the top of that government. There is no fuzz on that. It is a high confidence judgment of the entire intelligence community. Members of this committee see the intelligence. It's not a close call. That happened. That's about as unfake as you can possibly get. And is very, very serious, which is why it's so refreshing to see a bipartisan focus on that, because this is about America, not about a particular party.
So that was a hostile act by the Russian government against
Yes, sir.
Did the president, in any of those interactions that you shared with us today, ask you what you should be doing, or what our government should be doing, or the intelligence community, to protect America against Russian interference in our election system?
I don't recall a conversation like that.
No. Do you find it odd?
Not with President Trump.
Right.
I attended a family meetings on that with President Obama.
Do you find it odd that the president seemed unconcerned by Russia's actions in our election?
I can't answer that because I don't know what other conversations he had with other advisors or other intelligence community leaders. So I just don't know sitting here.
Did you have any interactions with the president that suggested he was taking that hostile action seriously?
I don't remember any interactions with the president other than the initial briefing on January the 6th. I don't remember, could be wrong, but I don't remember any conversations with him at all about that.
As you're very aware, it was only the two of you in the room for that dinner. You told us the president asked you to back off the Flynn investigation. The president told the reporter.
Not in that dinner.
Fair enough. Told the reporter he never did that. You've testified that the president asked for your loyalty in that dinner. The White House denies that. A lot of this comes down to who should we believe. Do you want to say anything as to why we should believe you?
My mother raised me not to say things like this about myself, so I'm not gonna. I think people should look at the whole body of my testimony, because as I used to say to juries when I talked about a witness, you can't cherry pick it. You can't say I like these things he said, but on this he's a dirty, rotten liar. And you got to take it all together. And I've tried to be open and fair and transparent and accurate. A really significant fact to me is, so why did he kick everybody out of the Oval Office? Why would you kick the Attorney General, the President, Chief of Staff out if it was about something else? And so that to me, as an investigator, is a very significant fact.
And as we look at testimony or as communication from both of you, we should probably look at consistency.
Well, looking at any witness, you look at consistency, track record, demeanor, record over time, that sort of thing.
Thank you. So there are reports that the incoming Trump administration, either during the transition and or after the inauguration, attempted to set up a sort of backdoor communication channel with the Russian government using their infrastructure, their devices or facilities. What would be the risks, particularly for a transition, someone not actually in the office of the president yet, to setting up unauthorized channels with a hostile foreign government, especially if they were to evade our own American intelligence services?
I'm not going to comment on whether that happened in an open setting. The primary risk is obvious. You spare the Russians the cost and effort of having to break into our communications channels by using theirs. And so you make it a whole lot easier for them to capture all of your conversations and then to use those to the benefit of Russia against the United States.
The memos that you wrote, did you write all 9 of them in a way that was designed to prevent them from needing classification?
No. And on a few of the occasions I sent emails to my chief of staff or others on some of the brief phone conversations that I recall. The first one was a classified briefing. Although it wasn't in a skiff, it was in a conference room at Trump Tower. It was a classified briefing, and so I wrote that on a classified device. The one I started typing in the car, that was a classified laptop that I started working.
Any reason in a classified environment in a skiff that this committee would not be appropriate to see those communications from, at least from your perspective as the author?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blow. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Comey, when you were terminated at the FBI, I said, and still continue to feel that you have provided years of great service to the country. I also said that I had significant questions over the last year about some of the decisions you made. If the president hadn't terminated your service, would you still be, in your opinion, the director of the FBI today?
Yes, sir.
So you took as a direction from the president something that you thought was serious and troublesome, but continued to show up for work the next day.
Yes, sir.
And 6 weeks later, we're still telling the president on March the 30th that he was not personally the target of any investigation.
Correct. On March the 30th, and I think again on April 11th as well, I told them we're not investigating him personally. That was true.
Well, the point to me, the concern to me there is that all these things going on, you now in retrospect, or at least you now for this committee, are these serious concerns about what the president that you believe directed you to do, and had taken no action, hadn't even reported up the chain of command, assuming you believe there is an up the chain of command, that these things had happened. Do you have a sense of that looking back, that was a mistake?
No. In fact, I think no action was the most important thing I could do to make sure there was no interference with the investigation.
And on the Flynn issue specifically, I believe you said earlier that you believe the president was suggesting you drop any investigation of Flynn's account of his conversation with the Russian ambassador, which was essentially misleading the vice president and others.
Correct. And I'm not going to go into the details, but whether there were false statements made to government investigators as well.
Any suggestion that General Flynn had violated the Logan Act, I always find pretty incredible. The Logan Act has been on the books for over 200 years. Nobody's ever been prosecuted for violating the Logan Act. My sense would be that the discussion, not the problem, misleading investigators and the vice president might have.
That's fair. Yes, sir.
And had you previously on February the 14th discussed with the president in the previous meeting anything your investigators had learned or their impressions from talking with them?
No, sir.
So he said he's a good guy, you said he's a good guy, and that was no further action taken.
He said more than that, but there was no, the action was, wrote it up, briefed our senior team, tried to figure out what to do with it, and just made a decision. We're going to hold this and then see what we can make of it down the road. Yes, sir.
Was it your view that not briefing them yet, you really had no responsibility for them, the Justice Department and so on?
I think at some point, and I don't know what Director Mueller is going to do with it, but at some point, I was sure we were going to brief it to the team in charge of the case. But our judgment was, in the short term, it doesn't make sense to, no fuzz on the fact I reported to the Attorney General. That's why I stressed he shouldn't be kicked out of the room. It didn't make sense to report to him now.
You know, you said the Attorney General said, I don't want to be in the room with him alone again, but you continue to talk to him on the phone. What is the difference in being in the room alone with him and talking to him on the phone alone?
I think what I stressed to the Attorney General was a little broader than just the room. I said, I report to you. It's very important you be between me and the White House.
After that discussion with the Attorney General, did you take phone calls from the President?
Yes, sir.
So why did you just say you need to talk to, when you say I'm not taking that phone, you need to talk to the Attorney General?
Well, I did on the April 11th call, and I reported the calls, the March 30th call and the April 11th call to my superior, who was the acting Deputy Attorney General.
I don't want to run out of time here. Let me make one other point. In reading your testimony, January the 3rd, January the 27th, and March the 30th, it appears to me that on all three of those occasions, you, unsolicited by the President, made the point to him that he was not a target of an investigation.
Correct, yes, sir.
One, I thought the March 30th, very interesting. You said, well, even though you don't want, you may not want to, that was the 27th, where he said, why don't you look into that dossier thing more? You said, well, you may not want that because then we couldn't tell you, couldn't say what, we couldn't answer the question about you being a target of the investigation. But you didn't seem to be answering that question anyhow. As Senator Rubio pointed out, the one unanswered, unleaked question seems to have been that in this whole period of time. But you said something earlier I don't want to fail to follow up on. You said after you were dismissed, you gave information to a friend so that friend would get that information into the public media.
Correct.
What kind of information was that? What kind of information did you give to the friend?
That the Flynn conversation, the President asked me to let the Flynn, I'm forgetting my exact own words, but the conversation in the Oval Office.
So you didn't consider your memo or your sense of that conversation to be a government document. You consider it to be somehow your own personal document that you could share with the media if you wanted to?
Correct.
Through a friend?
I understood this to be my recollection recorded of my conversation with the president as a private citizen, I felt free to share that. I thought it very important to get it out.
So were all of your memos that you reported on classified or other documents, memos that might be yours as a private citizen?
Sorry, I'm not following the question.
Well, I think you said you'd use classified.
Oh yeah, not the classified documents. Unclassified. I don't have any of them anymore. I gave them to the special counsel. But yeah, my view was that the content of those unclassified, the memorialization of those conversations was my recollection report.
So why didn't you give those to somebody yourself rather than give them through a third party?
Because I was worried the media was camping at the end of my driveway at that point, and I was actually going out of town with my wife to hide, and I worried it would be like feeding seagulls at the beach if it was I who gave it to the media. So I asked my friend, make sure this gets out.
It does seem to me that what you do there is create a source close to the former director of the FBI, as opposed to just taking responsibility yourself for saying, here are these records, and like everybody else, I have other things I'd like to get into, but not out of time.
Senator King.
Thank you. First, I'd like to acknowledge Senator Blumenthal and earlier Senator Nelson. I think the one principal thing you'll learn today, Senator, is that the chairs there are less comfortable than the chairs here. Welcome here. Mr. Comey, a broad question. Was the Russian activity in the 2016 election
Proposition, or is this part of a long-term strategy? Will they be back?
Will they be back?
Oh, it's a long-term practice of theirs. It stepped up a notch in a significant way in 16. They'll be back.
I think that's very important for the American people to understand that this is very much a forward-looking investigation in terms of how do we understand what they did and how do we prevent it. Would you agree that that's a big part of our role here?
Yes, sir. And it's not a Republican thing or a Democratic thing. It really is an American thing. They're going to come for whatever party they choose to try and work on behalf of. And they're not devoted to either, in my experience. They're just about their own advantage, and they will be back.
That's my observation. I don't think Putin is a Republican or a Democrat. He's an opportunist.
I think that's a fair statement.
With regard to several of these conversations, in his interview with Lester Holt on NBC, the president said, I had dinner with him. He wanted to have dinner because he wanted to stay on. Is this an accurate statement?
No, sir.
Did you in any way initiate that dinner?
No. He called me at my desk at lunchtime and asked me, was I free for dinner that night? He called himself and said, can you come over for dinner tonight? I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, 6 work? And he said, 6 first. And then he said, I was going to invite your whole family, but we'll do that next time. I want you to come over. And is that a good time? I said, sir, whatever works for you. And then he said, how about 6:30? And I said, whatever works for you, sir. And then I hung up, and then I called my wife and break a date with her. I was supposed to take her out to dinner that night. And
that's one of the all-time great excuses for breaking.
Yeah. In retrospect, I love spending time with my wife. I wish I'd been there that night.
That's one question I'm not going to follow up. But in that same interview, the president said, in one case I called him, and in one case he called me. Is that an accurate statement?
No.
Did you ever call the president?
No. I might. The only reason I'm hesitating is I think there was at least one conversation where I was asked to call the White House switchboard to be connected to him, but I never initiated a communication with the president.
And in his press conference on May 18th, the president was asked whether he had urged you to shut down the investigation into Michael Flynn. The president responded, quote, no. Next question. Is that an accurate statement?
I don't believe it is.
Thank you. With regard to the question of him being personally under investigation, does that mean that the dossier is not being reviewed or investigated or followed up on in any way?
I obviously can't comment either way. I can't talk in an open setting about the investigation as it was when I was the head of the FBI, and obviously it's Director Bob Mueller's responsibility now, so I don't know.
So clearly your statements to the president back in these various times when you assured him he wasn't under investigation were as of that moment. Correct. Now, on the Flynn investigation, is it not true that Mr. Flynn was and is a central figure in this entire investigation of the relationship between the Trump campaign and the Russians?
Can't answer that in an open setting, sir.
And certainly Mr. Flynn was part of the so-called Russian investigation. Can you answer that?
I have to give you the same answer.
We'll be having a closed session shortly, so we will follow up on that. In terms of his comments to you about, I think you were in response to Mr. Risch, Senator Risch, he said, I hope you will hold back on that. But when when a president of the United States in the Oval Office says something like I hope or I suggest or would you, do you take that as a directive?
Yes. Yes, it rings in my ear as kind of, will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?
I was just going to quote that in 1170, December 29, Henry II said, who will rid me of this meddlesome priest? And then the next day he was killed. Thomas à Becket. That's exactly the same situation. You're thinking along the same lines. Several other questions, and these are a little bit more detailed. What do you know about the Russian bank VEB?
Nothing that I can talk about in an open setting. I know it exists.
You know it exists. What is the relationship with
Who is the chief of mission at the Russian embassy, which employs a robust cohort of intelligence officers. So surely he's witting of their very, very aggressive intelligence operations, at least some of it in the United States. I don't consider him to be an intelligence officer himself. He's a diplomat.
Did the FBI ever brief the Trump administration about the advisability of interacting directly with Ambassador Kislyak?
All I can say sitting here is there were a variety of defensive briefings given to the incoming administration about the counterintelligence risks.
Back to Mr. Flynn. Would closing out the Flynn investigation have impeded the overall Russian investigation?
No. Unlikely, except to the extent there's always a possibility if you have a criminal case against someone and you bring in and squeeze them, you flip them, and they give you information about something else. But I saw the two as touching each other but separate.
With regard to your memos, isn't it true that in a court case when you're weighing evidence, contemporaneous memos and contemporaneous statements to third parties are considered probative in terms of the validity of testimony? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Or excuse me, Senator Wayne.
Well, Director Comey, good to see you again. We've had multiple opportunities to be able to visit, as everyone on this dais has. And I appreciate you and your service and what you have done for the nation for a long time, what you continue to do. I told you before, in the heat of last year, we had an opportunity to visit personally. I pray for you and for your family because you do carry a tremendous amount of stress. And that is still true today. Let me walk through a couple things with you. Your notes are obviously exceptionally important because they give a very rapid account of what you wrote down and what you perceived happening in those different meetings. Have you had an opportunity to be able to reference those notes when you were preparing the written statement that you put forth today?
Yes. Nearly all of my written recordings of my conversations, I had a chance to review them before filing my statement.
Do you have a copy of any of those notes personally?
I don't. I turned them over to Bob Mueller's investigators.
The individual that you told about your memos that then sent on to the New York Times, did they have a copy of those memos or were they all
Had a copy. Had a copy at the time.
Do they still have a copy of those memos?
Good question. I think so, because I can't say for sure. I guess I don't know, but I think so.
So the question is, could you ask them to hand that copy right back to you so you can hand it over to this committee?
Potentially.
I would like to move that from potential to see if we can ask that question so we can have a copy of those. Obviously, those notes are exceptionally important to us to be able to go through the process so we can continue to get to the facts as we see it. As you know, the written documents are exceptionally important. So there are other documents that we need to be aware that you used in your preparation for your written statement that we should also have that would assist us in helping with this.
Not that I'm aware of now.
past the February the 14th meeting, which is a very important meeting, obviously, as we discuss the conversations here about Michael Flynn. When the president asked you about he hopes that you would let this go, and the conversation back and forth about him being a good guy, after that time, did the president ever bring up anything about Michael Flynn again to you? You had multiple other conversations you have documented with the president.
No, I don't remember him ever bringing it up.
Did any member of the White House staff ever come to you and talk to you about letting go of the Michael Flynn case or dropping it or anything referring to that? The Director of National Intelligence come to you and talk to you about that?
No.
Did anyone from the Attorney General's office, the Department of Justice, ask you about that?
No.
Did the head of NSA talk to you about that?
No.
The key aspect here is if this seems to be something the president's trying to get you to drop it, this seems like a pretty light touch to drop it, to bring it up at that moment, the day after he had just fired Flynn, to come back in and say, I hope we can let this go, but then it never reappears again. Did it slow down your investigation or any investigation that may or may not be occurring in Michael Flynn?
No, although I don't know there are any manifestations, outward manifestations of the investigation between February 14th and when I was fired. So I don't know that the president would have any way of knowing whether it was effective or not.
Okay. Fair enough. If the president wanted to stop an investigation, how would he do that? Knowing it's an ongoing criminal investigation or a counterintelligence investigation, would that be a matter of trying to go to you perceive, and to say you make it stop because he doesn't have the authority to stop? Or how would the president make an ongoing investigation stop?
Again, I'm not a legal scholar, so smarter people answer this better, but I think as a legal matter, the president's the head of the executive branch and could direct, in theory, we have important norms against this, but direct that anybody be investigated or anybody not be investigated. I think he has the legal authority. All of us ultimately report in the executive branch up to the president.
Would that be to you? Would that be to the Attorney General? Would that be to who that would do that?
I suppose you could do it to, if you want to issue a direct order, it could do it in any way. You could do it through the Attorney General or issue it directly to me.
Well, is there any question that the president is not real fond of this investigation? I can think of multiple 140-word character expressions that he's done publicly.
Mtakunywa kituoni, mtazuru ambao wataungana na Odinga. Naivasha. Nimeelewa SGR na yeye wapi? Nautu change. Nautu change zero. Typos. Naivasha. Wataka kwa bandari wapi? Naivasha. Mali ikiingia na meli iwekwe juu ya treni ama reli. Nimeelewa SGR na iende wapi? Naivasha. Mtakunywa kituoni, mtazungumza kituoni, kuhakikisha kituoni, kuhakikisha kwamba nimelinda kura za Raila Amolo Odinga.
Jose means see you next time.
Oh, hey. See you next time. That's
Hebu tumuoneshe kwa mkono baba. Tumuoneshe kwa mkono.
Initial briefing of our findings. Enjoyed this conversation now. Exactly. We have questions about what we found.
Mali ikiingia na meli iwekwe juu ya treni ama reli hiyo yao SGR na iende wapi? Kufurahi kumkaribisha baba Raila Amolo Odinga. Haya. Mali hiyo yao SGR na iende wapi? Na Kipasa.
And even cartoonists were arrested in a morning break. They have been behind bars for 200 minutes.
Now I can't change anything. Being sabotaged. You're still sampling t-shirts.
One of the reasons that I'm pleased to be here and that this committee has shown one of the reasons Americans even so we have two parties that disagree with one thing. Together, two party including of itself, but also
Right now you'll be crying.
three times the person, 6 conversation with in fact, the contrary, quite often. And he called me one day, I was about to get on a helicopter, and the DEA was waiting for us out there. Just called to check in and tell me I was doing a good job. Just called to see how I was doing. I said, fine. So now I can do some long
I have a serious story I want to tell you. I'm not
I don't know. Okay. I've said before, I've said extraordinary difficult pain. I get what I had to do. Very bad. I had to counselors, that might have been very bad. I'd like to try it now. I don't know. That might have been.
The February 14th meeting, in Oval Office, you mentioned the U.S. Attorney General session was for short. You never mentioned the U.S. Attorney General session was for short. Did you ever consider why the Attorney General session was not asked to stay in the room? The Attorney General session was not for short stay in the room.
Quando si è spagnato con noi,
In that moment, I heard talking about, in that moment, I heard talking about
The inquiry, you should have the inquiry was for the wars and the drama.
I did say to him, I said, you have to be between me and
Problem.